Todo lang sound.
Oh, miss, yung slide po, wala po yung audio file ng data privacy.
So I'll just read it. Data privacy reminders. The La Salle College of St. Benilde, or the LSCSB, respects her right to privacy and is committed to protect the confidentiality of your information. Thus, has adapted necessary organizational, technical, and physical measures to secure it. The LSCSB is bound to comply with the Data Privacy Act of 2012, or R8 10173. It's implementing rules and regulations and relevant issuances of the National Privacy Commission. By participating in this video, meeting, conference, or webinar, you are consenting to our collection, including recording in accordance with the privacy notice. Information is also processed via video conferencing platform, Google Meet. Please refer to their data privacy at their website. This information processed, name, email address, her image, video, and audio will be used for attendance, documentation, communication, and systems administration purposes by authorized individuals of the department, office, or unit organizing the event, and other offices authorized to have access. We also use information gathered from you for abuse prevention and privacy protection. The CSB shall only retain the said personal information until it serves its purpose, after which it shall be securely disposed of. Queries and complaints can be directed to the data privacy officer at dpo@benilde.edu.ph. So let's officially start our program by an opening prayer. So let's put ourselves in the presence of the Lord, in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Lasallian prayer. I will continue, O my God, do all my actions for the love of you. Mary, Our Lady of the Star, pray for us. Saint John Baptist de La Salle, pray for us. Saint Benilde Manson, pray for us. With Jesus in our hearts forever. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So before I introduce our speaker for today, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the following. Of course, Sir Harvey, our program chair. We have a special guest today, si Sir Dean Sly of Adamson. Hi, Sir Sly. Sir Sylvester said no. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. I also saw interior designer and program chair for interior design program, Mandy Kat Correa. Miss Kat? Hi, Miss Kat.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We also have our mentors, Sir Nandi De La Paz. Sir Nandi.
Hi, everyone.
Sir Mark Patulot, Architect Mark Patulot.
Hi. Hello. Join ako, Mama.
And Miss Michi.
Si Miss Angie is also here, Angie Ramos.
Hi. Good afternoon.
So next is, we will now introduce our guest speaker for today. So, Architect Angelus Maria Sales, the corporation's head for external affairs of TAO Pilipinas. She's a licensed architect whose field of interest lies in historic preservation. Angel has a bachelor's degree of architecture from the University of the Philippines, College of Architecture, and a graduate diploma in archaeology in the University of the Philippines Archaeological Studies Program. She initially joined TAO Pilipinas in 2005 as a staff for the Research and Publication Program and worked on the regular publication of TAO Shelter Magazine, project documentation, and a research project on heritage conservation. She has authored and published 2 manuals on house construction for social housing, and she moved to the Young Professionals Program by 2013. She is currently the corporations head for external affairs of TAO Pilipinas. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us give a virtual applause to our speaker, Architect Angel Sales.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Is my voice clear?
Yes.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very honored to be here to give my lecture about participatory design and the entire process of what we do in TAO Pilipinas. Thank you for that introduction. So I was told that I was already given an introduction, but to just talk about shortly, briefly, because I already recorded my presentation. But I will want to give a brief introduction about myself. So they mentioned, yes, I began at working at TAO Pilipinas in 2005. So that's when I first graduated at College of Architecture, and I'm still there. We celebrated our 20th year this year. So the organization has been around for 20 years, and it was founded by 2 architects from UP College of Architecture also. So my lecture will be talking about participatory design process, but the flow of my lecture would be I decided to give a brief introduction just to contextualize what is the situation of our socialized housing. So I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with our socialized housing sector, and I'm not sure if well, in my experience as an undergraduate in UP, the housing sector or the socialized housing as a subject, we barely touched on it. There was a subject, but we barely touched what was happening or what's going on at my time when I was in the undergrad. So I wanted to give just a brief contextualization of what's the situation of our socialized housing program right now, and then after that I'll be proceeding with participatory and why is it needed, because I established in my presentation the connection between the lack of community participation as one of the issues in socialized housing. So after that, I proceeded with discussing the definitions of participatory design and the community participation. And then, given those contextualized backgrounds, I will give a brief presentation of what we do in my organization of TAO Pilipinas, and what the organization is all about. It's a nonprofit organization. And then after that, we'll proceed to discussing the different case samples. So I think I highlighted around 3 examples of our projects where we incorporated participatory design process, and I also gave one example wherein we transitioned to doing online because we didn't when the pandemic hit. Of course, everyone up until now, our office is still doing remote work from home setup. So all of our interventions with the community are remotely done. So we've managed to do it still participatory, with challenges, of course, of doing it online and remotely. So I've introduced a part of that, and then at the very end are lessons and insights based on the experiences we've gathered doing participatory exam. And then after that, there's an open forum. So if you have questions during, it's a very long recording video. I was afraid that if I do it live right now, there might be in the middle of doing the live session, there might be some technical difficulties. I didn't want that. So I just recorded my presentation so you could, it will be uninterrupted. And then if you have questions in the middle of those, please feel free to just put it in the chat box, and I'll address those questions as the best I could. Okay, if that introduction is all right, maybe we could play the video.
All right. Todd, let me share my screen now.
Okay, thank you.
So, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me start.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Angelo Sales, the Corporation's Head for External Affairs at TAO Pilipinas, and I'm here to discuss about participatory planning and design for socialized housing. For the outline of my presentation, I'm going to talk about socialized housing in the Philippines, participatory planning and design. I'll also give a brief overview about TAO Pilipinas and some case examples on participatory planning and design. I'll also give lessons and insights from our experiences doing participatory planning and design. So let's go to socialized housing in the Philippines, just to give a context for the discussion. We'll talk about housing need, what is socialized housing, what are the issues encountered in socialized housing. Adequate housing is a basic human right. For housing to be deemed adequate, there must be security of tenure, basic utilities and infrastructure, access to livelihood opportunities and basic services. It must be affordable, habitable, and culturally adequate. So it's more than just providing the physical dwelling. Rather, adequate housing encompasses building communities that ultimately enable people to thrive and attain human development. In the Philippines, the housing backlog is now at 6.57 million units by 2022. This data came from the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. This gap sums up the accumulated needs of the informal sector and the future or recurrent needs of the formal sector, including the repair and replacement of housing units. The government implements socialized housing projects to address this need. So what then is a definition of socialized housing? Socialized housing, as per Republic Act 7279 or the Urban Development and the Housing Act, states that socialized housing are housing programs and projects covering houses and lots or home lots only undertaken by the government or the private sector for the underprivileged and homeless citizens. It shall include sites and services development, long-term financing, liberalized terms on interest payments, and such other benefits. But there are also other definitions for socialized housing, and it can be categorized or defined based on its ceiling prices. For socialized condominium projects or those vertical developments, the ceiling price ranges from 700,000 to 750,000 pesos for condominium projects located in Metro Manila and other nearby areas. For all other areas, such as provinces, the price range is from 600,000 to 650,000 pesos. So what does this mean? It means that if you have a condominium unit that costs around, say, 720,000 pesos, then it's considered as a socialized housing project. For socialized subdivision projects or those horizontal development or housing typologies such as row houses, duplexes, single attached, or single detached houses, the ceiling prices range from 480,000 up to 580,000 depending on the floor area of your houses. So if you purchase a house and lot for 550,000 pesos, then that is still considered as a socialized housing project. Again, all these figures came from the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. So in addressing the housing backlog, the government's dominant approach to socialized housing has been the top-down, off-city resettlement of informal settler families, with the private sector producing the shelter units. And due to this kind of approach, it often leads to several sustainability issues encountered in socialized housing, such as low occupancy rate of housing units. So a lot of the units are unoccupied. Low retention rate of beneficiaries. So they either rent, resell units, or move out eventually and return to informality. Low collection rate of amortization. Only a few are able to pay their monthly mortgage loan. And unsafe and deteriorating housing units due to substandard construction, and there are even the settlement sites that are located in flooded or landslide prone areas, or even the settlement sites found near fault line. So with these issues encountered in socialized housing, let's now look at a partial problem tree diagram. We highlighted our sustainability issues, and we're just going to trace the causal relationship of different factors that contribute to the issues encountered in socialized housing in the Philippines. So first, let's look at low retention rate and low occupancy rate and what may be the cause of these issues. So it could be due to lack of sense of ownership. It can also be due to inappropriate housing design that do not meet the needs of the beneficiaries. It can also be caused by the dismantling of social capital, or the network of relationships of the beneficiaries are split apart. It can also be due to unaffordability, as well as deteriorating housing units and unsafe housing units. And affordability can also be the cause for low collection rate issues. So now let's look at a much deeper cause for unaffordability. So unaffordability may be caused mainly because of lack of access to services, utilities, connective infrastructure, and economic opportunities. It can also be caused by lack of social preparation of beneficiaries, wherein the beneficiaries are unable to have a savings scheme or a livelihood program. And the lack of social preparation can be attributed to the lack of community organizing of the beneficiaries, while the lack of access to services can be attributed to off-city resettlement to peri-urban sites, or when beneficiaries are relocated to far-flung areas. And this in turn may be caused by the lack of inventory of idle public land, as well as the high cost of urban land areas, such as Metro Manila. So in all of this, we can see that the lack of community participation can be the root cause of all these issues encountered in socialized housing. Again, this is just an exercise to see the relationship between different factors. So it's only indicative and by no means exhaustive. There may be other factors in play. So this is just to illustrate that the issues are complex and deeply rooted. But ultimately, we can see that a lot of the issues stem from the lack of community participation. So which leads us to participatory planning and design. So I'll be talking about what is community participation, what is participatory planning, and why do we apply participatory planning in socialized housing. So what is community participation? This is the engagement of communities in decisions about things that affect their lives. Community participation is not the same as consultation. So just merely doing consultation does not mean you are already doing community participation, but rather communities play an active part and have a significant degree of power and influence. So now let's look at the level of participation in a project. So this is taken from the community planning handbook. So we can see in this diagram the different level of community involvement. At the very bottom level is the information, wherein there's one-way flow of information from authorities that initiate, plan, implement, and maintain the project. Then the next level is consultation, wherein there is a degree of feedbacking. Communities are consulted by the authorities that initiate the action and plan and implement, as well as maintain the project. The next level is what we call the partnership, wherein there's a shared working and decision making both from the authorities and the communities. So they jointly initiate, plan, and design and implement the project, as well as maintain them. So there is a much higher degree of influence coming from the community. And then the highest goal of level of community involvement that we want to achieve is what we call the self-help. Here, This is the highest degree. Usually, community has strong organization able to control various stages of the project. For this particular level, the community initiates the action, plans, and implements the project all by themselves, as well as maintain the projects all by themselves. So given that definition of community participation, what then is participatory planning and design? So it is an approach that actively involves community members in the planning and design process to help ensure that as its end users, the designed product meets their needs and is usable. So how do we achieve this? So first, we could plan or design ideas that are drawn out from the community. We also have to make informed decision and consensus by the community. And also use of formal and informal ways for people to have meaningful participation or input to plan or design. So why do we apply participatory planning and design in socialized housing? So what are our basis for doing such approach? Okay, so there are numerous bases for this, for community participation. So first is for under the right to adequate housing, it's stated that participation in housing-related decision-making at the national and community levels. And there are also enabling policy environments of various laws in the Philippines that recognize and support people's participation in planning and governance, among others. So we have our Philippine Constitution, the Local Government Code, the Urban Development and Housing Act, and then one of the latest bills that have been passed is the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development Act. And also we have the Sustainable Development Goal 11, wherein housing is an integral component of human settlements, particularly Target 11.3, which states that by 2030, enhance inclusive and sustainable urbanization and capacity for participatory, integrated, and sustainable human settlement planning and management in all countries. So that's the basis, and let's discuss now the reasons why we apply participatory planning and design in socialized housing. One reason is informed participation gives people access to technical or specialized knowledge that can lead to better decisions by communities. So specialized knowledge such as architecture and planning can lead to better decisions by communities, resulting in more appropriate solutions and effective use of resources. Another reason is participation has the potential to spark community activation, foster collective ownership, and shared responsibility. It enhances social cohesion and promotes sustainability of project. There is a sense of ownership, which more likely to ensure the actualization of the project to their satisfaction. Another reason is that local people's participation can bring additional resources to a project and at the same time give opportunities for people to develop skills and network, which leads to empowerment and added economic value. Another reason is that collaboration between local people and professionals improves the quality of planning and design because there is greater insight from indigenous knowledge of the community with respect to their needs, problems, and possible solutions. So given that these are the reasons why we do participatory planning and design in socialized housing, let's now look at our organization, TAO Pilipinas. So I'll give a brief discussion of who we are and how we started and the services and project areas that we cover, and as well as our teams and partners. The TAO stands for Technical Assistance Organization. It is a women-led, non-profit, non-government organization of built environment professionals providing technical assistance to organized rural and urban poor communities with shelter-related needs in community planning, development, and management. Our partner communities are those who usually cannot afford the professional services of architects and engineers. TAO Pilipinas was established in 2001 by a multidisciplinary group of individuals who wanted to have a socially responsive professional practice. The vision of TAO Pilipinas is the development of sustainable human settlements that is inclusive, people-centered, environment-friendly, and promotes equitable distribution of and access to resources, To realize this vision, TAO has threefold mission: to promote the participatory approach, to enhance the technical knowledge and skills of stakeholders, to translate the meaningful participation and technical knowledge gained into planning and design of sustainable communities. Our goal is working towards improved living and housing situation and climate and disaster resilience for the poor and advocate for the rights of nature in the Philippines. So this map shows the geographical coverage of TAO projects. So initially, we began working in National Capital Region, but have expanded since to cover various parts of the country. So we've worked in the Bicol region, we've done the Eastern Visayas region, as well as the Western Visayas region, even the Central Visayas. And we've also worked in Northern Mindanao. Currently, for our 3-year project, focuses our technical assistance in Angat, Bulacan, where we have a site development for a peri-urban resettlement site. It's a horizontal development. We are also working in Binondo and Santa Mesa, Manila, where we have a high-density housing to be constructed for the off-site and in-city resettlement of families residing near or along waterways and roads. And we're also working in Lupang Arenda in Taytay, Rizal, where we will be doing site upgrading and reblocking of a high-density urban sprawl development. So these 3 areas are highlighted in the map. So over the years, TAO Pilipinas has engaged with various groups and institutions as project and network partners. So we have major funding partners. We also work with community associations, as well as other non-government organizations. We also are involved in other network meetings. We've tied up with academia, and of course, we also have private sector consultants. TAO's range of services can be categorized into 6 groups. So we do people's planning and shelter assistance. We also do professional and consultancy services for our community association, as well as other nonprofit organizations. We do capacity building training. We also engage in post-disaster rehabilitation. We've done research and publications. And of course, we train young professionals and do continuing professional development lectures and seminars. Okay, so let's go to case examples of participatory planning and design. So I'm going to talk about Masagana resettlement. So we have this subdivision planning. We're also going to talk about Manikani sustainable shelter, house design, and then the PPP VHOA high density housing, site planning, building, and housing unit design. And I'm also going to talk about online participatory planning methods. So the ideal flow of activities this is the ideal flow of activities in a participatory planning and design construction process. But since we'll only be tackling the planning and design phase, we'll focus on numbers 3 to 5 for the case studies that I will be presenting. So we'll be talking about activities showing participatory planning and design workshop, design schemes based on workshop results, and validation. So we'll only be covering that part. So for Masagana resettlement, this is located in Barangay Pulong Yantok, Angat, Bulacan. So we did subdivision planning workshop. So as a context, the families of Masagana formerly lived in the midst of a fish pond in Barangay Tansana, Botas. Over the years, the area became permanently inundated, especially during typhoons. So the community eventually decided to find another resettlement area. So this is in Angat, Bulacan. The community chose the off-city peri-urban site. So from their regional site in Barangay Tansana, Botas, they traveled to Barangay Pulong Yantok and relocated there in Angat, Bulacan. So the project stakeholders, we have Masagana of Angat HOA, we have the LGU, we have TAO Pilipinas, and then for funding support, we have Asian Coalition for Housing Rights and CENAV. So the activity objectives. So in doing the subdivision planning, the objectives were for Masagana member households to formulate a site development scheme for the resettlement site in Angat, Bulacan. to determine the sizes and layout of lots and prioritize community spaces or facilities to be included in the resettlement site. Their design needs and preferences and affordability levels are also considered in the proposed lots and lot sizes and house unit designs. So the participatory processes involved, we did pre-workshop capacity building activities. So we did hazards and resources mapping, land research and titling, and we taught and gave a lecture on Batas Pambansat 220. The implementing rules and regulation of Batas Pambansat 220 stipulate guidelines, minimum standards, and technical requirements for the design, planning, and development of economic and socialized housing projects. So these are the design parameters that we use. Okay, the building law that we use when designing socialized housing. So the workshop process, we did plenary discussion on open spaces and community facilities. Okay, we divided the members into 6 groups for the subdivision layout planning workshops. And then they also do selection of preferred schemes. So they chose the top 2, the best among the outputs of the 6 groups. And then they also did community action planning after they've come up with the schemes for their subdivision design. Okay, so this is an example wherein the community presented the output of their group. The tools for site planning, we have a lot plan drawn at 1:200 meter scale. So that's the base plan. We also prepared site planning toolkits. We have guide questions for planning workshop. And then we have a community action planning chart. Okay, so this community action planning chart, we made use of this. So after they've selected the schemes, so they will know what to do or the activities to be implemented for them to realize having that subdivision layout. So for the outputs and use of outputs, TAO Pilipinas developed the community schemes to come up with technical drawings. So these are the outputs of the 6 groups for the final subdivision layout, which are presented to Pasagana and validation meetings. So the chosen output is translated into technical drawing. So this is what you can see in this plan. And then we've also made a model for them to better visualize what their subdivision development would look like. So next is the Manikani Sustainable Shelter or Project Pagbangon. This is located in Manikani Island in Giwan, Eastern Samar. So the activity we've done here is a house design workshop. So the Manikani Sustainable Shelter is a component of Project Pagbangon, which is a post-Yolanda rehabilitation project, or the international name for Yolanda is Typhoon Haiyan, that made landfall in 2013, and as we all know, it's one of the most powerful tropical cyclones ever recorded. And Eastern Samar was one of the most devastated. The project stakeholders for the shelter component of this project are 40 households in 4 barangays. We also have the municipal LGU of Giwan and the barangay LGUs of Manikani. So there are 4 barangays in total. We have PMPI, TDH Germany, Christian Aid, and of course our organization and our consultants, Ridge to Rib Solutions and AMH Philippines. For the activity objectives, for the workshop on sustainable and disaster resilient settlements planning, there's a 2-day capacity building activity for housing beneficiaries to enable them to propose housing solutions and make informed decisions. So for the pre-design workshop sessions were conducted for the participants to gain the following capacities. Know basic principles of sustainable development, disaster risk reduction, and disaster resilience. Identify the safe zones for building structures in Manikani Island based on the assessment of a geologist. Note the considerations for planning and designing settlements in small islands and coastal areas. Identify local good practices in house design and construction and disaster risk reduction. They also need to know options on alternative building materials for the housing projects, such as compressed earth blocks, interlocking compressed earth blocks, concrete interlocking blocks, wood wool cement bonded board, micro-concrete roof tiles, and bamboo. And also learn retrofitting methods to strengthen existing houses in Manikani against earthquake, typhoon, and flooding hazards. So for the house design workshop, the activity objectives were to draw out the needs and preferences of beneficiaries and to come up with a house design scheme agreed upon by all beneficiaries. So as you can see here, photos, these are the community participants working on their house design scheme. And after working on their house design scheme, they presented their schemes to the other groups. So the participatory process that they underwent during the house design workshop were discussion on beneficiary selection process and result. We also did a lecture on Batas Pambansa 220 design standards, did lecture on examples of sustainable and disaster resilient house design. We also did a design workshop for shelter unit using at 1:30 meter model making, scale model, presentation of proposed house designs, and plenary discussion on selection of preferred house design and discussions on final design considerations. So with the tools for house design, materials for lecture inputs were given, so a PowerPoint presentation and handouts were made in Filipino, 3D model of house on stilts, hazards map of Manikani printed on a tarpaulin, posters on Batas Pambansa standards, posters on alternative building material, 3D design toolkits for workshop groups. So these are the design toolkits that we made use of. And then, of course, guide questions for the groups to facilitate the different schemes that they could come up with. For the outputs and use of outputs, house design features agreed on by the 5 groups were they wanted to have a 2-bedroom house. They wanted a floor area not less than 22.5 square meters. They chose a space layout and roof design of group 2. They wanted to have a reinforced concrete structure. They wanted their walls made of concrete hollow blocks or either interlocking compressed earth blocks. They wanted the hip or gable roofing using GI sheets or micro-concrete roof tiles. And they also want to have a raised on grade flooring. So these are some of the photos showing the design workshop phase for our Manikani Sustainable Shelter Project. The 3D scaled model by Group 2 garnered the most votes among the participants. The group made use of an 80 square meter lot with a 32.5 square meter floor area. The house could accommodate 6 to 7 people. The house design was chosen mainly because of its efficient space layout and the sturdy roof design. It served as a basis for the technical drawings prepared by TAO Pilipinas. Reduction of the final area of the house to 25 square meter was made to reduce cost. Again, these are just some of the photos showing the community participation for the Manikani Sustainable Shelter Project. So let's now proceed to the PPV-HOA High Density Housing. It's a site planning, building, and house unit design. The location is in Santa Mesa, Manila, and we had a site planning and housing design workshop. People's Planville Homeowners Association, or PPV-HOA, is an alliance of community associations composed of 200 informal settler families currently residing near or along tributaries and roads in Benilde, Manila. They plan to relocate in Santa Mesa to their proposed high-density housing. The project stakeholders are People's Plan Bill Homeowners Association. We also have Community Organizers Multiversity. This is the nonprofit organization that focuses on their community organizing. We also have Foundation for the Development of the Urban Poor. They are the community mobilizers of the group. And of course, our group, and we're also working with Social Housing Finance Corporation because the community is planning to avail of the community mortgage program of the Social Housing Finance Corporation. And of course, we have our engineering consultants. For the activity objectives, for the pre-workshop capacity building activities, we did visits to housing sites. We also conducted orientation workshop on planning standards and design consideration. We also visited to existing high-density housing projects. So these are just some of the photos showing the community during their visit of existing housing sites. This one is in Ernestville in Quezon City, and the other one at the bottom part is in Valenzuela, and also Pasig and Apuamp, and in Pasay City for the staff housing project. The activity objectives of the workshop on planning and design for high-density housing is to serve as a community consultation to create the technical plans for site development and building design. Also to guide the community to agree on a design scheme that will encompass the needs, desires, and capacity to pay. And also extend the knowledge necessary for the community to understand the processes needed to create plans and designs and to help them make informed decisions regarding the housing project. So for the participatory process, we did a review of the BP 220 standards and comparison of visited housing projects. We also did clustering concepts. We introduced clustering concepts in high-density housing. We introduced concept of gendered spatial considerations for high-density housing. We also did a discussion on affordability levels of the community and loanable amounts from Social Housing Finance Corporation. We also did a discussion on cost comparison for building construction and site development. For the planning and design workshop, we did an understanding of technical drawings. We also lectured about site analysis. We also did site planning and building design layout, as well as residential unit design layout. And after which we also, the community also came up with a criteria for evaluation for the preliminary scheme selection and underwent preliminary scheme selection and validation workshop. So these are just some photos showing the processes that the community underwent. So for the tools that we use for the planning and design workshop, again, we have materials for lecture inputs. We made PowerPoint presentation and handouts in Filipino. We have a poster on Batas Pambansa standards. We made use of design toolkits for workshop groups. So we have a 2D site planning and building layout toolkit, which is scaled 1:200, and a 3D house unit toolkit at 1:30 meters. And of course, we have a guide questions for the groups to help them facilitate the discussion during their focus group discussions. And we also printed a copy of the digitized schemes for the validation part of the workshop. For the outputs and use of outputs, the high-density housing features agreed on by the 4 areas were they wanted the 5-story building, they wanted to have 2 commercial units within the residential project, and also 1 multi-purpose hall. They wanted to use rainwater harvesting system as well as use solar PV system for the communal spaces of the residential areas. and use of SRC panels for their walls. So this is the exterior perspective of the high density housing for PPD HOA. So let's now proceed to online participatory planning methods. Can this be done online? And if so, what are the online tools and what are the issues encountered in doing online participatory planning? So for the question if participatory planning can be done online, yes, it can be done online. So one example is the Lupang Arenda online reblocking workshop. So on October 6 to 8, TAO Pilipinas conducted an online trainers training to simulate a reblocking workshop that the community has to undergo. So the participatory process that they went through is mostly involving community mapping. So they mapped their existing utilities and they did a reblocking workshop through laying out of proposed road network. So we use online tools such as Concept Board for simultaneous collaboration. So this is the exported output of Group 1, which is the group that I facilitated. So as you can see, we have the guide questions again to facilitate the discussions. So this focus group discussion one is the mapping of their utilities, existing utilities. So for a more blown up image, so we were able to map the different utility lines such as the water, power, and if they have solar power or solar street lights in their community, we also ask them to map them, and also the drainage lines. So we also ask them to pinpoint where are their drainage outfall in the area. So this is a screenshot of Group 1 working on a focus group discussion tool wherein they have to lay out the proposed roads for this particular homeowners association. So as you can see, there are several people collaborating online to map the proposed road layouts, and there are also guide questions asking them about problems and issues that they might encounter during the reblocking workshop. Okay, and this is the Zoom that I was able to screen share the Concept Board app in Zoom, so the participants can also see if they're unable to see it from their browsers. We also made use of online interactive presentation tools such as Mentimeter to get real-time feedbacks from participants as part of our evaluation of the workshop. As you can see here, this is one example wherein we asked the participants to grade the different inputs during the day. The tools I mentioned are just some of the available online tools. There are numerous online tools that can make participatory online planning visible, such as Google Jamboard, Slido, but you have to explore which tools are the easiest to use and would best suit your needs. For the problems encountered, some participants are still unfamiliar with the technology used despite an online dry run before the workshop proper. So we had an online dry run a week before the workshop proper, so we could have a separate time to orient the community participants on the tools that we are going to use for the actual trainers training workshop. And we also asked them to have a tech support on standby with them if they are not familiar with the tools or the technology being used. So we encourage them to ask youth participants, because most of the community leaders are senior citizens or middle-aged adults. So we asked them to get their youth to participate so they could have a tech support with them. Another problem encountered is communication is difficult when participants are so many. So there are instances when some participants are together in one place, so feedback and echoing happens, which greatly affects interaction. So this happens in one of the focus group discussions in one of the groups, Group 4, they were unable to fully maximize the discussion because when some of the participants are answering the guide questions, the facilitators are getting feedback from the group, so they are unable. So the facilitators were unable to draw out answers from the community. And another problem is internet connection and lack of available hardware necessary to fully maximize the online applications used. So internet connectivity still plays a big role in ensuring active participation of community members during online planning sessions. And for this workshop, we required participants to use laptops and tablets to see the maps clearly, but not all of the participants have access to such hardware. So a lot of the participants were doing this from their mobile phones. So it was a bit difficult for those who are using their mobile phones. So those are just some of the problems encountered when we did this online reblocking workshop. But online participatory planning is very much visible with the technology around us. It's just a matter of encouraging the community and facilitating their learning to use those technologies. So let's now proceed to more general lessons and insights that we have gathered from the doing participatory planning and design. So we'll talk about the role of technical professional and the challenges and advantages of doing participatory design. So the role of technical professionals. So for participatory planning and design process, the technical professional becomes a facilitator of community participation. There will be a shift from the traditional role as the creator, author, provider to that of an enabler to accommodate community participation. So if you, as architects or engineers or planners, are so used to being the provider of knowledge, with participatory planning and design, it shifts. There's a difference. We, instead of becoming provider of knowledge, we become an enabler of knowledge. We facilitate the learning, we facilitate the participation of communities when we do participatory approaches. And the important skill set that we must possess is one we need to learn to design with instead of design for people. We also need to create the mechanisms to extract creativity or design input from the community people. So this is a skill that takes a lot of time, a lot of getting used to. If you're not used to facilitation, okay, so the facilitation skill, so that you will be able to interact with the communities or be able to make them answer the questions that you've provided for them. To lead the discussions is also an important skill. And translating or interpreting the design input from the community into a feasible design solution that reflects the community's aspirations, ideals, or values, as well as communicating technical knowledge to non-technical people. So this is a very important skill set. We need to know how to explain the technical knowledge in simpler terms so that non-technical people or laymen will be able to understand the technical terms you are talking about. And lastly, you need to have respect, empathy, patience, and perseverance when dealing with communities and doing also participatory planning and design process. So for the challenges in doing this kind of approach, one challenge is commitment from key stakeholders. So it's a bit difficult to get commitment from key stakeholders that would also like to do this kind of approach. And it also takes resources to obtain accurate data, develop accessible information, and tools for capacity building. And one more challenge is, of course, time for community organizing, building consensus, and dealing with disagreements, as well as creativity and skilled facilitation to ensure people stay engaged and contribute to the discussion. And another challenge is accommodating cultural and language needs, enabling people to provide quality input and usable feedback. So it's very important that you consider the cultural needs of the community you are working in or you're working with. And for the advantages of doing participatory approach, the results of workshop give evidence that the plans communities help create are viable. And this creates community ownership of the design. So there's a sense of ownership from the community because they have been engaged or they have been part of the process in coming up with the design. It also helps the community understand design options and project trade-offs. So for this kind of approach, the community are able to better understand, to see the bigger picture in the project and what could work and what could not work. And this can also enhance the level of trust in local governments willing to accept community inputs. And of course, the knowledge transfer. It gives people access to information or tools that empower them to convey information, develop their own ideas, and evaluate proposals from others. Okay, so that's all for my lecture. Thank you for listening. And I hope you were able to learn a lot from my presentation. So these are just some of the references that we used in coming up with this presentation. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
Thank you for that wonderful and sobrang hitik na presentation, Ms. Angel. Let's give again Architect Angel a virtual applause. Yeah. Now the floor is open for question and answer.
Miss Erica,
Yes.
I have a question para we can start the ball rolling.
All right.
Miss Angel, just have a few questions. The first one is, how do you handle the jargons when it comes to presenting or engaging a community? Like for example, even the word mapping. Mapping is not really that familiar in terms of the use in a normal language, but in architecture, mapping is a loaded term. So how do you handle yung jargons?
So first, the jargons, we do, as much as possible, we do away with the jargons. We actually translate everything into Filipino. So
Wow.
that's one of the challenges that we came up when I was actually starting with them. I was more used and more comfortable in speaking English, so it was really a bit challenging for me when they had to ask me to write in Tagalog and in Filipino. The book that I published was in Tagalog, no? It's a construction manual. So those kinds of things. So for them to be able to understand as much as possible, we do away with the technical jargon. We tell them what it is and use words, simpler words, and tell them that this is mapping. When you say mapping, you draw. You draw and pinpoint in a location in a map. That's what we call mapping. And imagine we were also asked by communities to translate geotechnical jargons because one community in Lupang Arenda, they were having a hard time understanding the risks, the geotechnical risks in their area. So they asked us to translate the meaning of liquefaction, the meaning of what does soil bearing capacity mean, what does it mean when you have a low soil bearing capacity, what does it mean if you only have 50 kilopascals for their soil bearing capacity. So those kinds of things, as much as possible, we use visual illustrations as well for them to really grasp the concept. So, and then of course again translate it in Filipino. Aside from that, when we work in Eastern Summer, so that's the language barrier because Filipino is not their dialect, no? So it's not so waray yung ginagamit nila doon. So it was a hard task for us. We asked locals to translate the maps that we made. The geologists that we brought in made geohazard maps, so they translated it into the local vernacular language. So those kinds of things. So to lessen the for them the intimidation as well. When they look at the technical jargons, the community gets intimidated. So for them to understand it, we have to translate it into the local language and explain in much simpler terms. Find if it takes a longer explanation, then so be it. But at the very end, the important thing is for the community to understand the technical terms.
All right, thank you. Kasi when we saw your examples, they're making models, they're
Yes.
understanding architectural concepts. So
Yes.
coming from a community, of course, not really prejudice, but coming from a community or yung of the marginalized, you wouldn't expect that kind of output. So what are also your, I mean, it's not always successful. So what are the ones that did not what are the ones that failed in a way that in process? And then what do you think were the reasons why it failed?
Well, it we have a lot of learning processes in terms of like transferring the technical knowledge. When we started, the tools that you see right now that we have been flashing in the presentation, those were just recent tools. But when the organization started, it was just two architects, and so they were just drawing by themselves the technical plans and all of that, and then telling the community. One, I guess, in terms of like failure, we learn from the mistakes. Like even we thought when we were able to produce those 3D scaled models, they would be able to understand the concept of scale. So before, as I've mentioned in my lecture, we teach the community understanding of technical plans. So that's the very basic one before they proceed into doing those scaled models or doing those 2D layouts. We have to teach them the concept of scale. We provide them with their own fan scale. Um, so in one of our experiences through the years, we realized that that it's quite hard for them to grasp the concept of scale. So they were building windows that are not even if the windows themselves were already scaled, but the height in terms of like the height of the windows they're doing, it's not scaled. So we realized to add to that kit, what was missing was entourage. So we provided scaled entourage as well. When we started providing people, that's when they realized, oh, the windows they were doing were too high. The rooms that they were doing is not enough for a person, even though there's like the beds, the furnitures that we provide are also to scale. So those are some of the learnings. And of course, they would still insist on what they want, and that's why it's very important that we also provide the lecture on the Batas Pambansa 220 and have them grounded, especially if they have issues with affordability. So before we really ask them to do those planning and exert all the effort, we really put their expectations down to the ground. Like if they have affordability issues, then we tell them that we are only limited based on the costs to this kind of floor area. So no matter how much they want a bigger floor area, we need to tell them that. So they understand that and they know their limitations. So you would be actually surprised of how much they would be able to understand. But of course, really, that's why I mentioned in the skills, it takes patience and perseverance and also empathy to just understand where they're coming from and the situation of the community.
Thank you. We really appreciate the work you guys do in TAO Pilipinas um in terms of extending the practice of architecture towards the marginalized, and in this sort of communication and opening up and making normal people understand what we do as architects is actually the core of our issue in the Philippines in terms of why there is a gap in terms of misunderstanding. So in seeing the process that you do, the patience that you guys have in relating our practice to this sector of our community is really inspiring for us as architects. So I think there's questions na that are already coming in from
Yes.
our mentors and for all. Yeah.
Miss
So, Erica.
Angie, do you want to ask a question?
Okay lang.
Yes.
Hi, good morning. My question is, paano na nga ba nagkakaroon ng projects ang tao? Do LGU approach you or other private companies or developers approach you to assist them? Or do communities approach you or you look for communities that need help?
Oftentimes it's the communities that approach us, and most of the time our one basic requirement is for the community to approach us, they have to be organized community, like need to be they have to have a legal identity, they need to be a community association, and also one requirement is that they, as much as possible, they need to have a community organizer. So that's why we also partner with other nonprofit organizations, because we are architects, we are technical professionals. We do not have the skill set required to do community organizing. No? So those are not the skill set that we've learned in the undergraduate year. So as much as possible, whenever communities approach us, we ask them that they need to have community organizers. So in terms of like the housing projects, it's most of the time it's our network of NGOs that approach us and tells us, oh, we need support with that. We need the support of architects. So you might be interested. So those kinds of things. So that's usually our network partner. And in terms of the work we did with LGUs, it's the initiating funding agency. Like for example, we also have a set of environmental planners in our group. So we provided local shelter planning workshops in Salcedo in Eastern Samar. So the funding agency approached us to help the municipality of Salcedo. So it's most of the time it's either the funding agency or the community associations themselves that approach us and ask the support for technical assistance. And in terms of like the housing projects, the money does not come from our organization. It's always that we always want to clear that up. No? So we do not provide funds to housing projects. So we do not have that. It's most of the time it's the international funding agency that comes to us and then asks us to do the design, and also construction. We delved into construction when we started doing post-disaster rehabilitation work. So initially, when the organization was founded, it was just design and doing capacity building. But through the years, we realized that they also needed support in terms of doing construction. But the way we do the construction is mostly self-help. So it's not your usual mainstream where you get a contractor or you do bidding. So that's not what we do. Most of the time it's self-help. It's the community who chooses the skilled laborers or who they will contract to build their house. So we give the decision to the community and just we provide the technical support in making sure that the skilled laborers that they got follow the construction guidelines or the construction manual that we've come up with. So it takes really a lot of tools to really do it the way you want it to be done. Like in terms of construction, it's really difficult because there are some of the skilled laborers, especially those in the provinces, they have their own set of traditional construction methods that we advocate for a disaster resilient type of construction. So we tried telling them that, oh, you need to have foundation, you need to have enough rebars for your foundation, you need to have the 135-degree hook beds in your rebar. So those are important. So we teach the community the theory thing because they already know how to build. No, the skilled labor, they already know how to build. We just try to teach them the whys on why these things are done and what is its implication if you don't do it in terms of like when a disaster strikes. So those kinds of things. It's a bit difficult because in terms of communication, we really have to be patient because not everyone really also understand. So that's why in terms of like the visual aspect of it, we really put up a lot of visual materials. We do 3D drawings of step-by-step construction of how the rebars would look like. But again, even if those are done, there are still some communities that are really hard-headed and are set in their ways. And for those kind of things, you just really have to exercise a lot of patience.
All right. Next question is from, and someone raised his hand. Dean Sly, you want to ask your question?
Yes, hi, good afternoon, TAO Pilipinas, right?
Sure.
I have a question because you said that your projects involve from the design brief, right? Project conceptualization until the construction. Have you given them manuals on how they properly take care of their houses once you turn over to them, right? And how do you keep it sustainable? Because again, during the course of usage of the house, they might touch any part of the house that might undermine the structural integrity, in the face of natural calamity. So, and of course, they have ever-changing needs because we have the extended family system here in the Philippines. So, how do you make it sustainable for them to not forget what they've learned from you, no?
Yes. So our process of doing participatory, when we've done construction, it just doesn't end there. We have a series of capacity building, like we do house extension workshop. We do estate management workshop. So we have a lot of capacity building really. And through the years, we've come up with the modules on the different aspect of it. So if and in terms of like the participatory approach, it could be in phases like the community, if we feel like the community does not have the organizational strength to undergo like their own construction and manage their own construction, then we just do it like in terms of half. Like we could switch to the more traditional way of them having a contractor. So we could also do that approach. But to sustain this, to sustain it, we do house extension workshop. We tell them the limitations if there are like site restrictions in their area. We tell them what are the restrictions in terms of like how much you could extend your house. At least we instill the parameters of the B220 standards. So for most of the time it works. Of course, again, there are outliers for communities that are a bit hard-headed, but for most of the time it works. And then also estate management, we've partnered with a few organizations wherein we did research on the effects of estate management. So it really is one of the reasons why some of the old government housing projects did not work, because they did not incorporate estate management. So now we're trying to influence different civil society organizations in the housing sector. We're trying to influence the government to see the value of estate management when they're doing turnovers, when they're turning over those housing, that they also have to incorporate estate management in the policies and programs of the community association, because it's one of the reasons that would make the project a success. No? So they have to institute community policies within their community association that would restrict like some development guidelines. Of course, again, it has to be a consensus for all of the community when they come up with those policies. That's why we do the estate management workshop.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. Actually, last question na lang. Singit ko na lang to. Very sorry. Because we are running out of land, no? Imagine we have a population increase, right? But what I saw in your developments are really sprawling, no? It's like a subdivision type housing. So what is your viewpoint about tenement housing? Because again, we don't have any choice but to go up someday, right? So what is your viewpoint about that? Yeah.
So we support also low-rise and medium-rise buildings. So that's actually what we're trying to advocate in the in-city housing right now, because some of the community associations really don't want to go out of the city. But if they don't want to go out, so we tell them that your choice of housing is really very limited. So you have to build, you need to learn how to live in a vertical type of development, in a condominium. So if you would notice in the past 10 years, this last decade, the government housing projects is really shifting to, at least within the city, shifting to those socialized condominium projects. and community association have also realized that this is the way to go if they want to stay within the city. If they're willing to resettle, then they would go with the sprawling horizontal type of development. But if they want to stay within the city, then tenement type or like vertical type of development is the way to go. And it took a while because when I started in TAO Pilipinas in 2005, and when I was joining the workshops done by my seniors, the community at the time were still very much clinging to the notion of land, house and lot, to that kind of values. But since this last decade, the Social Housing Finance Corporation and even the National Housing Authority have introduced low-rise buildings as the way to go for the for socialized housing, and it took a while for the community associations to accept, and it also is a change of values. We need to let them know that you need to change your values when you live in this kind of settlement, because it's more compact, it's more dense, and you can do things that would really affect your other neighbors. So, and unlike when you're doing like horizontal development, so those part of things we inculcate those in estate management workshops. Those are those are the points that we try to teach in our estate management workshop.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, next question is from one of our students. Hi, Miss Angelus. Did TAO team have a chance to go back to those areas? If so, can you say that project were successful?
For the Masagana is a very long, arduous settlement project. Up until now, actually, it's not finished. When I came into TAO in 2005, they were still in Navotas, and they resettled in Angat around 2011, and now they are a part of them are still in Navota. So our problem right now is we want them to join community mortgage program, and we were finally able to convince them after several years of them being doubtful of joining the community mortgage program. But in terms of like successes, the ones in Eastern Samar, we've finished that, so that's an end project. We haven't had the chance to come back. We did come back in Manicani a year after because we're still doing the project in the nearby island of Humonmon. So we were able to do a post-occupancy evaluation, and they were more or less, I think the project there is a success because for that particular project, the beneficiaries themselves or the community themselves are the ones who chose the 40 beneficiaries. So really, it's a community process. But one stipulation of the funder is that they have to really relocate because their original areas are within the coastline, like very near the coastline. That's why they were inundated during the Typhoon Haiyan. So we asked them to move a little bit back or go a little bit further, and we asked them to find the land. With the provinces, land isn't much an issue because they have their own lands there, or they ask if they do not have their own land, like a relative. So there's like a tenural instrument where the owner would sign that they would let their relatives stay in the land for so long of a period. Okay, so for that particular, I think it's a success because they were able to transfer. And I remember what's the recent typhoon? Because what we did there was a permanent house, and then we also built evacuation centers in 3 of the 4 barangays there. So but the evacuation center is only like around 100 square meters, so it's really very limited. So during more of the recent typhoons that is also similar to Haiyan that they had, one feedback that we received is that they accommodated neighbors within their permanent house. So, and they were more secure now when the storm was happening, that their roof won't be blown away or their walls won't collapse or fall down, because they know that when the houses were being constructed, they were there, they were supervising themselves, so they know that the houses were really durable. And so yeah, so the house themselves also acted as a like a temporary shelter for their neighbors during the storm. And I guess one more feedback, the ones recently we've been working with the one in Taytay Rizal, so we've only been there for like only 4 years. But when we did an interview, because we came up with a paper for a conference, so we wanted to know the behavioral changes or the changes in values of the people. For Lupang Arenda, it's more of capacity building that we did for them, to let them know the hazards in the area, because before we came, they were in denial of the geo hazards in their area, because they were afraid that the hazards would be used against them to ask them to be evicted, to be demolished. So now they were telling us that they realized the value of having technical professionals. So when they're building community facilities, they're now consulting technical professionals, when before all of their houses were non-engineered houses. So that's one of the changes that made all of the hard work that we've been doing there really worth it. To hear that they're now consulting technical professionals, whether it's an engineer or architect, it doesn't matter to us. But as long as they have the knowledge that they need to consult technical professionals when they're building or constructing their house.
Right. Miss Angel, I'm just curious.
I hope I answered the question.
Yeah. I'm just curious how long does it take,
Yes.
the whole process from the start ng project to the design? Kasi di ba yun yung medyo challenging, because you have a lot
Yes.
of people to talk to, di ba, FG?
Yes. With PPV HOA, this one is the high density, the 5-story building from Binondo to Santa Mesa. That up until now we're done with the technical drawings. We are now looking for a contractor, but the entire process, it's really long. It depends actually, but the shortest, I guess, 6 months. We could do it in 3 months, but the very safe is 6 months.
6 months.
Yes, we could
Same
probably
process
do it in
pa
3 months but again, that's just the design.
Yes.
That's just the design. Because for doing the design workshop, the preparation takes us around a month, because those tools were already made. Our interns made those, our undergraduate interns. Those are the things that some of the undergraduate interns do. So we'll already have a stock of those models and of those cutouts. But if we don't have them, then we ask some of our staff to produce them. So it takes around 2 weeks of preparation for that. And of course, the lectures, we've already had them. But if we have to introduce new lectures, depending on the needs of the community, then that probably would take another week or two. So it's 1 month of preparation, and then doing the actual workshop that usually is take 2 days, 2 to 3 days of design workshop. Because the first day usually is just lectures of all the topics that they need to know. Usually 1 day and a half of lecture, and this is face to face. When we've done this online, the reblocking workshop was 3-day, 4-hour lecture, and it's a bit really difficult also. But yeah, the entire process of just doing the design per se usually takes 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
That's the shortest for me.
Okay. Maybe we'll have one. Okay, sir, one more question from Miss Angie again. Miss Angie.
Yes, this is a follow-up to Miss Erica's question regarding the timeline. Have you established some sort of yung ratio between the number of technical people you need and the household that they can handle? Kasi I want to relate that to what you said earlier, that you hope that LGUs adopt the participatory planning. But ang LGUs kasi natin, I think they are running after time. They're
Yes.
faced with a lot of households to provide shelter with. So like for Quezon City, I think there's about 124,000 households. And in one of your projects, I think I heard that there are about 40 households. No? I wonder how many technical people you need for 40 households. So meaning to say, siguro LGUs may find it hard just for the time being siguro to adapt participatory because of the huge number
Yes.
na kailangan. So is there some sort of a ratio between na-establish na ba yan?
We haven't established the ratio, but one that we know of is when we do this design workshop, it's all hands on deck. So we are now around seven technical staff. So it's really whenever we do design workshop, at least for the 3 days, because before the setup of our organization, there's there's an education and training program that is really handling all the capacity building. So that's the program I came from. We're the ones in charge of doing the preparations, the kits, the toolkits, the modules, and all of that. But come design workshop, the rest of the other technical professionals would have to pitch in terms of who will be the one giving these lectures, who will facilitate, because we break them up into focus groups, so we facilitate. So yes, it's really the time is really one of the deterrent why some of government agencies are not doing participatory design approach. But it can be done, and you don't need to really fully do it like the way we do it. And our way is like the ideal way. But what we already given lectures to contractors and builders. We've partnered with Social Housing Finance Corporation, and one of the capacity building we did for them is for contractors and builders, just orienting them on the participatory approach. And of course we know that it really entails time, that usually the approach of these contractors are they already have a design and then they just give it to the community. But what we want to tell them that you could engage with community and get their feedbacks, and because that is what happened with one of the housing program of NHA in Pasig, the APO AMF that's in Manggahan Floodway. They did constant consultations with the community. So in that sense, that can be considered as participatory. As I've mentioned in my lecture, there are different levels of participatory. The best one is wherein the implementers as well as the communities really work together. But given the time constraints and the housing backlog, the government can just really push for whoever technical professionals they're hiring, that to really just consult and really hear out the feedbacks of the community when it comes to the houses that they're designing. Okay, the ideal is what we do, like really engage a committee and get the output from them. But I know those are really difficult to do. But at the very least, ask, consult the community. That's the very least that they should be doing, just so you could get the feedback from the community, and it won't be something they won't come up with houses that won't suit the needs of the community. And that's why they are relocating again, and they're not going to those houses, or they're not using those tenement housing because it did not suit the needs of the community.
Follow up, last
Yes.
question na lang, Miss Erica, if you may. Sige. How about yung when you do the participatory or yung self-help during construction, do SHAFC allow, kumbaga parang, for the construction po, so yung kung magkano yung babayaran ng mga
Yes.
household, do they get some sort of, ano bang tawag doon? Parang nalilesen ba yung kailangan nilang bayaran because they did the self-help in the construction?
With SHAFC app, I think I'm not sure if they've changed, but with Shafsi, I think they do not allow yet the self-help. That's why with this project of ours in Santa Mesa, we're having a hard time looking for a contractor. Well, the community is having a hard time looking for contractors because they have Shafsi has a lot of requirements that contractors need to be accredited by Shafsi. So those kind of paperworks. But for now, I think Shafsi is beginning to recognize the self-help approach, but they are still a bit wary because, of course, there are still disadvantages when you do self-help. Like the standardization, like if they would be able to really follow the right construction process, as opposed to when you have a contractor who really knows how to do and build those houses and have already experienced. So that's why, in terms of like when you're going through community mortgage program, as far as I know, the SHAPSI still requires that you have your contractor.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. So before we end, let's we want to present the certificate.
One last question na lang.
Okay, sir.
Go.
Sorry.
Sige.
Like, Miss Angel, like for students that are interested in practicing, what do you call yourself? Community architects, tama?
Yes, community
Like,
architect.
for students that are interested in this kind of advocacy, can you give a short pitch lang? Kasi I think we need a lot of people like you that work in the margins. What's the prospect ba in terms of if you're
Actually, there are only 3, as far as I know, right now. The 3 nonprofit organizations doing the kind of work that we have ours, TAO Pilipinas, and we're the only ones who are all women. And then we have Tampei, and then we have Alterplan. So Alterplan more is within planning, and but those 3 organizations are the ones really engaged in wherein their staff are composed of architects, planners. So we're really very limited. So most of the time, that's why we have our young professionals formation project. So we start them early as much as possible to really open up that there are alternative forms, alternative careers in architecture. If you really want to do this, for me, I was open when I was introduced to Tao in my college years because of UP Task Force Archi. So I was a member of UP Task Force Archi, and then I met the founders in my college days when they asked us to volunteer to do post-occupancy evaluation of their housing project in Tondo before. So that's how I met them. And then when I graduated, I know I didn't want to go into the mainstream practice. I know I want to do something different. So that's when my friend introduced me to this work. I really grabbed on the opportunity to work with Tao. So yes, there is an alternative career. If that is what you want, then you just need to find the right organization that would support your kind of career choice. So you could also go with Habitat for Humanity. They have in-house architects there, you know, or even the government NHA is looking for in-house architects as well as social housing finance corporations. So if you really want to go to those kind of and be more involved in the housing sector, so those are the career pathways that you could go on.
all
And
right?
for me, I really started with them. I never had the chance to really work to a mainstream practice, but I was able to really get a holistic mentorship from my senior architect in the organization.
All right, thank you. Mamaya we'll talk about that mentorship in our closing remark. Okay, thank you, Miss Erica.
Thank you. So we would like to present our certificate of appreciation to Miss Angel. So yeah. Thank you, Miss Angel, for sharing your invaluable knowledge on introduction to participatory design. Given this the October 29th via Zoom. Thank you very much. And I hope the students learned a lot. And Sir Harvey, You may
Yeah, just to close off lang. Thank you, Angel, for taking the time and spending your afternoon with
Yes,
us.
you're
For the
welcome.
students that are interested in internship for TAO Pilipinas, we've had a few students that have applied in the past and with great success kasi they were able to use the learnings in their thesis. In particular, I think Ira Yap did his internship last 2018 or 2019. Is that right, Angel? And then he used his internship as a springboard for his thesis. So they are accepting internship and they are in our roster of internship offices in our apprentice. So those that will be taking apprentice in the next few terms, they are available for that. And I think tama yung sinabi ni Angel, the diversity of our practice is important. This kind of advocacy is important, and it's a sort of an action, call to action to really democratize our practice. So yun yung that's the usual criticism for our practice, that we only manage to service the elite. In a way, of course, that is correct. But in practices like Miss Angel has shown this afternoon, there is a lot of people that needs architecture, that needs our services. And I think it's now time for us to really spread our practice. So thank you, Angel, for sharing your afternoon with us. And then I think we have evaluation forms in the chat box for those that entered. And I think the last one would be to request everyone to open their cameras for our documentation, for our picture, a group picture for our documentation. So please.
Harvey, if they have questions, I put in the
Fine.
chat box the email of our YP program, so they could just ask if they're a bit shy right now.
Yeah.
Your students.
Oo nga, parang mas excited yung mga mentors in terms of questions.
mas
Kasi like,
maraming tanong.
kami kasi parang in terms of yung different practices, we're really excited in exposing ourselves, our students, to practices that are really not defined as mainstream architecture. So, napaka-exciting nito para sa amin. Although everyone is to have this kind of career, but from your slides nga, we know that how important this practice in architecture is. So let's open our camera, and we will be, as we recorded the lecture, we will be uploading this in our YouTube channel. So please also subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can also rewatch, and then you can share doon sa mga hindi umabot. So, Ms. Erica, if you can.
Yes, I'm just waiting for the others to turn on their cameras.
Thank you sa mga co-faculty that attended. Sir Sly of Adamson, maraming salamat sa wonderful question. Hopefully, we'll see you again in the next few webinars, sir. And then, pwede ka mag-cross-post, sir, sa amin if you need for your event.
I think marami dito students ko. Asan na yung camera nyo, guys? Bakit hindi kayo naka-on? Konti na lang. I guess
Okay lang naman kung hindi lahat. It's okay.
Alright. Smile, everyone. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
MC, Ma'am Erica, okay lang if I can talk to you. Stop recording na.
Yeah. Sige.
Thank you, Angel. Thank you, everyone, for joining us
You're
this afternoon.
welcome.
Next webinar would be